Well, happy New Year, everybody. My name is Mike Sibley, leader of the James Moore Manufacturing Team, and I'm here with Kevin Golden, one of my partners and a member of the James Moore Manufacturing Team as well. So hopefully, as we kick off this new year here, that you're not already losing on some of your New Year's resolutions, but perhaps one of those resolutions is about how you improve your business. And today we've got once again Ed Marsh joining us. He's a business management consultant, has founded and operated businesses. As the founder of Ed Marsh Consulting, he assists lower middle market industrial manufacturers with strategy and revenue growth. Of course, Ed has been a frequent visitor here on our podcast. Always love having him on here. And you may have seen, we've been sharing a podcast today. Actually visited on Ed's podcast. It was about strategic finance. Great conversation that we had. So it would encourage you guys all to listen to that as well. But today we're getting back to talking about marketing, sales, and how companies market themselves with the way things are changing so drastically over a short period of time. You CEOs got to be and head salespeople really need to be thinking about how we're looking and digesting and how we're getting to our customers. And we got traditional thoughts of SEO optimization and social media, perhaps, and but now as things are so fast paced, technology's coming in, AI is coming into it, and the way that our buyers are really trying to get their research done and get what they need done, things are changing. And so how do we deal with these problems? How do we deal with these challenges in the manufacturing environment and overcome them? So Ed's going to help talk us through that. So Ed, welcome back to the show. Happy New Year. Glad to have you join us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoy these conversations. You guys bring an interesting angle, and it's great to kind of stress test some of our theories from both sides to find the right answer for manufacturers.
Right. Yeah. Well, and Ed, I like that term stress test. So let's do that a little bit. Okay. First of all, we say marketing. We say it's not, people aren't reading as much, whether it's think of like old things like newspaper and magazines. Now that's all digital, mostly digital. Now that's more on social media posts. Now it's in these small little maybe podcasts or some other thing that are just in a short time frame. You get the information you need to make a decision. Is it really a problem though, or are we just finding smarter ways? So is this really a problem for a business? Maybe I find sometimes myself included, maybe it's even a product of maybe information overload. So give me, if I'm a manufacturer, maybe put it in perspective for me. How much of a problem is this, or how concerning is this really for me today?
I'd say it's kind of like heart disease. It's sneaking up on a lot of us based on lifestyle habits, but we don't realize it. We continue along blithely and happily until suddenly there's some sort of a crisis. And I think that we're in much the same situation because you talked about the way you're consuming information, and that's changing. The problem is that if you look at the way most companies are producing and sharing information, that's not changing. And so, I mean, let me give you some statistics that maybe give us some context for the conversation. Right now, and this has really happened over, say, the last 12 to 18 months. So, from 2010 until 2023, typical digital marketing, SEO, content marketing, inbound marketing, whatever you want to call it, worked pretty well. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of nuance to it. There was a lot of technique. You had to do it right. But if you did it right, it was pretty straightforward. What's changed very suddenly is that now only 28% of all Google searches actually click on an organic search result. So in other words, organic result is not a paid listing, not Google's answer at the top, but a typical listing that you would look at beyond the sponsored ones where, well, geez, these people look like they know what they're talking about. Let me read this. Let me check this out. That's only 28% of them. 60% of Google searches go nowhere. They get the answer right at the top or they do another search. And of the 40% that go somewhere, it's about 30% actually just go to another Google property like YouTube.
Yeah.
That's from research that SparkToro did. It's fascinating. So we've got this dogfight for what really is a zero sum to get Google rankings.
Mm-hmm.
Getting the rankings is brutally hard. Even maintaining rankings is tougher. Um, it consumes more resources. There's this flood of information. People are overwhelmed. Then you have to, even if you rank, you got to get clicked. If you get clicked, you actually have to engage the buyer. The buyer has to take the time to read what you've got and actually be willing to fill out a form or engage with a chatbot. And all of those efficiencies or conversion rates are deteriorating at the same time. At the same time, 80% of vendors only put companies on their short list that they were familiar with before they decided they had a problem or a project and started doing the research. And 70% of the time, the top vendor on that short list wins the order. That's research from Pavilion and Trust Radius. It's very similar to some Sixth Sense research that I saw yesterday from manufacturers. So, most industrial manufacturing companies have this mindset of we'll do some SEO, we'll create some content, we'll get some website traffic. That website traffic will turn to leads. Those leads will turn into opportunities and sales, but it's not really happening anymore. So we have to really back up. I would argue we need to shift our thinking from we were tantalizingly close, which I'm sure the accounting folks and the very kind of process-oriented manufacturing folks were really excited that it seemed like we were within striking distance of being able to attribute every revenue dollar to a specific marketing dollar.
Right.
Unfortunately, now I think we're drifting away from that. And we're almost going back to a situation where, we're not talking about just dumping money into trying to build brand, but we probably are talking about investing resources in building trust and building relationships, because we have to be known if we want to get on the short list, but people aren't doing the search. So they're not going to find out about us because, they say, oh, how do I find the best, what's the best pallet racking system for efficiency or something like that. That's not what's going on. Very early on in their buying journey, what we might call a pre-awareness stage, mm-hmm. Or let's say it differently. If only 3% of buyers are typically in the market for any given product or service at any given time, right, that means that 97% of the time they're not thinking about it. And if the 3% of the time you have to be on the short list and they have to know you ahead of time, that means we have to get them to know you and trust you and like you and have a relationship and feel an authentic connection and believe in your credibility and your authority and your expertise. During that 97% of the time, they're not thinking about what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So, I think that kind of fundamentally describes the challenge.
Yeah. So, it's interesting when you talk about Google searches and things like that. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not even using necessarily Google anymore. ChatGPT's got a search function, Perplexity, these other AI systems. And so what it's doing is taking all that mass amount of data and actually boiling it down. And then I'm searching from there. So that functionality is even changing in terms of how people are searching. And so it creates a whole new dynamic of what's out there. Now, so Ed, I'm an owner of a manufacturing company, or I'm in the management team. You're telling me, hey, this some of this traditional stuff isn't as effective. You talked about building trust, and so what does this mean for me? What do I got? What do I got to do differently now? What am I thinking about as an owner or a CEO of a business?
So you got to think about their business, not your business and not what you're selling. You have to think about their business and the problems that they're having during the 97% of the time in their business life where they're not worried about what you do. And so that means they're thinking about how they find and retain talent. It means they're thinking about regulatory compliance. It means they're thinking about supply chain issues. It means they're thinking about, payroll service or all different kinds of things. Maybe they're thinking about inventory turns, which is at the intersection, for instance, of what you all do and what they do. Not thinking about, geez, I need a different accountant or I need a better accountant. How do I reduce my carrying costs for inventory? How do I increase my turns? Those might be things they're thinking about. Mm-hmm. But the point is that we have to have a marketing engine that reaches those people with authoritative, helpful, and valuable information. And we also have to have salespeople who can go in and in a consultative way actually help a buyer realize they have a problem that they've never fully realized, mm-hmm, and create urgency using consultative selling toward a solution. So they have to be able to create projects, but our marketing also has to help buyers understand the questions they should be asking. The problem that most industrial manufacturers have when we talk about that is they look at their world as pretty closely contained within the space that they know very well.
Mhm.
And they're incredibly knowledgeable about that. They've spent years refining their understanding of it. And so they kind of the converse of that is they say, but we don't know about this other stuff. And so we don't feel comfortable talking about it or writing about it or having videos about it or having, a podcast about it or whatever. And they're right in a sense, except if that's what the buyers need to be hearing, because that's what's going to be valuable, that's what's going to begin to foster a relationship, we need to figure out how to bridge that.
Right.
And the way we bridge that, I think, is essentially by building a faculty, kind of like what you do by having different guests come on your show, what I do by having different guests come on my show. I mean, I had Mike come and talk about finance, and it's funny because people, if you talk about accountants and marketing spend, the typical answer is cut the marketing spend because it's not going to do any good. But we had a really interesting conversation about how you make that decision, and obviously it's more nuanced than that.
Mhm.
But that's an example of how we could kind of touch on adjacent sort of topics by my having a faculty of experts that are going to add value to my prospects long before they're ever thinking about the specific stuff I can do. So, at a high level, I think that's the answer, Kevin, is that we have to put together a body of information using outside experts that complement our knowledge and create valuable resources so that our prospects will know about us when they get ready to put together that short list.
Well, I think that's kind of let's go back to sort of definitional discussion of marketing, right? Marketing is about building that brand awareness and building out this is what we do, how we do, trying to get into that comfort level to make sure our buyers even know we're out there. And of course, then you've got your salespeople that are taking that and building that trust and doing the business development and bringing in the actual business. So you're right, you have to invest resources. And you kind of made the point early on. It's not always easy to just say, hey, we got X amount of sales dollars just because we did this.
Right.
Because I do think you have to think about brand awareness, which probably opens up doors for you.
Right.
And it could be a long lead time before some of those doors result in, but it's that brand awareness piece. And we don't have brand awareness. And sometimes it's very, very difficult to tie in an exact sale to a brand awareness type of scenario. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I would replace the word brand awareness with trust. I think that trust is really what we're talking about now at this point.
Yeah. Well, and it's I think you had said it a while back, Ed, and then maybe Mike just kind of hit on it there again. You can't tie every dollar of spend to some sort of ROI or some sort of output of, oh, well, I got this because I did that. And, I mean, that's very against manufacturing, right? If I produce this, make this, go through this process, I'm going to come out with this on the other end, right?
It's also against what marketing people have been saying since 2010. They've been promising that's exactly where we were going to get to. And we got really close, but now it's slipping away.
Well, but here's one way you can look at it, right? It may not lead to a specific sale necessarily, or you may not be able to tie it, but you should see growth over time.
Right.
For sure.
And that growth over time is not going to happen by accident. Now, sometimes it does, right? You fall into some luck, but I don't think hope and luck are a strategy for a business. So, I think if you're not seeing growth over time, then you're not getting any art, then you're probably not getting why. So, and oftentimes we do talk about value of a company and things like that. And we can talk a little bit more about that later on. But in my mind, you're going to see things happening or you're not.
Right.
And that's going to help build in whether or not you're seeing some of that ROI.
But that also hinges on the fact that your sales team can execute. So if you're having great marketing success, and this was easier to see when we talked about marketing in the context of lead generation before we started to drift back to this earlier stage pre-awareness, high level kind of thing.
Right.
But there was many times I'd see companies that would generate more leads without a single dollar of additional revenue. And you figure out that the clutch is slipping in the sales function where they just don't have the horsepower and the talent in order to execute on that sales play.
Well, we've had probably several shows in the past where we talked about sales, training, functionality, and processes, which also included KPIs and metrics, right? So if we see dozens of leads coming in and nothing ever turning into something. If I'm the CEO, I'm starting to think I don't have a brand awareness, trust awareness, marketing problem. I got a salesperson problem. We're not
Exactly.
closing anything.
Right.
Right.
And I love the fact that you guys, as an accounting firm, signed up and went as a team for sales training. It may still be going on, but I think that demonstrates a level of awareness and an intellectual curiosity and a professional commitment that no doubt kind of bleeds over into the advisory services that you're bringing to clients. So many companies don't even think about sales training, and you all have embraced it.
Yeah, in fact, we're finishing up our first cohort of it that started that last year, and we got our second cohort going through it again, this year. So we're all in. All the stuff that you talk about in terms of sales training processes, we're bought in. Just like whether you're a manufacturing company, whether you're professional services, whatever it is, systems are important, and
Right.
processes and all of that. And I think kind of coming back into this topic, understanding what you need to do in order to build that trust, as you say.
Right.
It's not a static environment. It changes all the time.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things, again, kind of coming back to, as a C-suite person, you're right. I'm thinking about inventory, working capital, people, all these things that I got to think about as an owner or CEO in a business, but I'm not necessarily always thinking, okay, we've been doing this kind of marketing approach for this amount of time. Is it effective? How's it working? Do I need to change? And what is it going to look like in 1, 2, 5 years from now?
Right.
Right. Right. Yeah. So Ed, I mean, these are all great. I mean, there's a lot of, true, if I'm a C-suite level or, owner of a manufacturing company, there's a lot to think about in there. As far as how I'm attacking, how I'm rethinking that. But what other types of challenges? I mean, we mentioned one of them. Okay, potentially maybe marketing does do well and we have a sales issue instead. What other sort of challenges behind, okay, if my marketing plan is not working well, or I'm not thinking about it well, may it pose for me if I'm a manufacturer, or any company really, but if I'm a manufacturer and a leader in there, what other type of issues may we run into that maybe aren't so as readily apparent?
So I'm sure we'll discover more as we go, because, as Mike says, it's changing really quickly. I mean, a lot of what we're talking about today wasn't even on the radar 18 months ago.
Sure.
But I mean, there's certainly a couple that I see on a regular basis. Number one, a lot of industrial manufacturers always had a hard time doing the V1 of content marketing. It was a struggle. And now we're talking about having to put it into hyperdrive, talking about topics and creating content and guests in areas entirely outside of what they're comfortable talking about. So that's no doubt going to be a challenge. I think a second one is the fact that they have to be willing to embrace these topics that are outside of their area of expertise, and that means really building a faculty of guests. It means building partnerships. It means finding companies that are interested in your same prospect base because they're adjacent, not competitive, but there's a mutual interest in doing it. And I think shifting your mindset about the kind of content that people are looking for is important. I've come up with a framework. I don't know, if it resonates with people or not, but I call it cool content, KUUUL. The idea is we need to talk about our prospects, known unknowns and unknown unknowns. That's where we're really going to help them improve their business. If we talk about the same stuff that they already know about,
Right.
we're not adding much value. If we get them while they're walking the dog and listening to a podcast to say, wow, I need to make a note of this and have a conversation with somebody when I get to the office today, or ask my accountant about it, or whatever the case may be. That's the way we need to do it. And we can't do that internally. We have to have people with outside expertise. I'd say a third challenge is going to be video and LinkedIn. People don't like being on video. Oh, it's not for me. I'm busy. I don't have time for LinkedIn. There's great research from Point Road Group that shows that 88% of the time, prospects are more willing to trust marketing messages from companies where senior executives are active and positive and outcome focused on LinkedIn. So they're thinking about your company. They're looking to see what your executives are saying and doing. And then another challenge that we already really talked about at I think in decent detail is the fact that we're now stepping back from the promise of being able to associate specific revenue with specific marketing investments. So it's got to be much more done as a business best practice and on faith, obviously with a lot of testing and tactical savvy and um, exploring different methods and different channels, but also accepting the fact that we're probably going back to, I know half of my marketing dollars are wasted. I don't know which half, but I believe that over time in aggregate, we're doing the right thing.
Right. But if you're, the way I kind of look at that marketing thing is, I've seen all the time businesses, our business, other businesses, you do stuff and then you look at effectiveness. It doesn't mean you can adapt and change. And I think that's, to me, that's the piece when you bring up like video and podcasts, things like we're doing. The podcasts are a growing feature among businesses and things of that nature because of exactly what you just said. But you have to be thinking out. So I'm kind of putting my C-suite hat on here for a second and saying what this means is you just can't rest anymore.
Exactly.
You have to constantly, when you're doing your strategic plan, a lot of times you hear about business development. That's, hey, what are the salespeople going out and going, but maybe not necessarily thinking about, hey, how are we building our trust in our brand? How are we doing that? How are we showing ourselves? And I think kind of what you're saying is buyers want to see that, hey, we're problem solvers, whatever that problem is. Same for our business. We want to show we're problem solving. Same with the manufacturing. Same with what you do, Ed, on this side of things. You're helping solve problems, and they see, hey, I want to associate with someone that can help solve my problem, not somebody that's just going to sell me on something, whether or not it's a problem or not.
Well, I think one of our earlier episodes, I already pissed off half of your audience, and I'll piss off the other half. And I'll say it again. Nobody cares about your product. Nobody cares about what you make. Nobody cares about what you do. They care about the outcome on their business.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is going to feel really awkward for kind of linear, structured, process-oriented people like accountants and like manufacturing executives, because really the chaos means we're talking about building the plane while we're flying it. And that feels really uncomfortable. And it's, not the way we've been told we need to do things, but it's the reality.
Well, I mean, think about how many businesses, manufacturers, any businesses over the last 40 years that were around forever, and then all of a sudden don't exist anymore. Right? Their products were no longer solving whatever problem. Now the companies that continue to exist continue to find ways to evolve and solve problems. And it really doesn't matter. It's a great point. It doesn't matter what business you're in. You exist to solve somebody else's problem. They have a need and you can help resolve that. And when you're not needed anymore, that's when you start saying, okay, our sales are going down. Why? Well, we haven't evolved. We haven't innovated. We haven't done anything different. And part of doing this in my mind is continuing that evolution of how do we solve problems with our know.
Right. Well, and earlier when you said, okay, no one really cares about your product and all. I think it's not just evolving. How can I make a better widget or whatever it is I produce? It's going to that thought of rethink yourself to how can I solve their problem? And then here's the tools I have available. I can improve those tools. I can do other things, but also includes people want to buy a solution.
But in most cases, recognize
they want to buy a computer that solves X, Y, or Z for them in their life. So again, like you said, focus more towards that, less on what it is that you're producing to lead towards that trust amongst with your company and your buyers.
And recognize they may not even be aware of the problem that you can solve.
Sure.
And so you can't go in barrels blazing, hey, you've got this problem, I can help you fix it. You have to use, say, a Socratic method in your marketing and in your consultative sales to help them discover that problem that they have, but they're not aware of, to bring them to the point where they're saying, geez, I hadn't thought of it, but this is legit. I need to spend some time looking at this and maybe get serious about fixing it.
Well, 15 years ago, we didn't know we needed smartphones the way we do now, right?
Right.
Yeah. All of a sudden, we found out we need this. I'm not sure how that happened, but we can't live without them, right?
Right.
Right. So let's shift gears a little bit here. Again, I alluded to this earlier. We always talk about it, adding value to our company, right? That's our goal here. That's your goal. That's my goal. That's what we talk about on this show is, okay, I'm a company and I want to add value to how is this going to add value to my company? How am I going to become a more valuable?
Yeah, I love the way you gents always tie this question back to value. Revenue growth isn't revenue growth for the sake of it. You got to increase margin. You have to have an eye on growing value. I would say that the key is to stop thinking of these as independent tactics. Let's try this or let's try that, and think instead with a framework of profitable revenue growth. I use the model I call overall revenue effectiveness, building on the manufacturing OEE, overall equipment effectiveness, kind of as an easy sort of an analog. But it's about continuous improvement, process engineering, the effectiveness mindset that we have operational and manufacturing, and how we apply that to the front end of the business. I mean, if conditions change in the plant, there's new materials, there's new technology, there's new different supply chain issues, there's different customer requirements. We just naturally adapt to them, and that's what we need to do. If that's the key to avoiding obsolescence of the business, we need to do the same thing and have the same mindset around the way we market. So what we've talked about today, who knows? In 18 months, if it's going to be a different set of issues, or if AI will have progressed in ways we can't anticipate, or if, an interesting example I saw this morning is that San Francisco real estate values are climbing quickly because AI companies believe the best way to create good AI products is to have people working together as humans in an office. So, if we try to extrapolate from what we hear is important today to what's going to be important in 6 or 18 months, I think we're going to be wrong. So we have to pay close attention. We have to continuously adapt.
Well, and don't you think that if a company continues to be innovative and builds that trust, there's a good chance that their salespeople are doing all the things we talked about earlier. They're bringing in those customers, and you're taking on the approach of, we're going to solve your problem. We're going to figure out we're going to help you solve your problem. To me, that makes you, those customers are going to be sticky customers, and you're going to continue to build that reputation as that trusted problem solver, and your revenue is going to grow, and that stickiness, and that's going to make you a much more valuable company as well.
Sure, of course. Absolutely.
Well, and if you think about it, most of these, when they get to at some sort of point in time, some sort of transition, let's say a PE buyout or something like that, they're not buying, because you make the best widget better than anyone else. There may be a component of that, but they're buying the fact that your customers trust you. And that's something that's not easily broken. I mean, it can be easily broken, but will sustain a long time, make them sticky, that they're going to be there in the long haul. As you product change, as you make innovations, as you pivot in the future as needed, they're going to be there with you to try out whatever it is. And that's what they really want. That's that longevity they're looking for their return on what they're looking for. So again, you can add some serious, value in terms of a transition, maybe a buyout, something like that, simply by focusing on getting that client base, getting that trust, building that stickiness amongst your customer.
Yeah, the predictability of future earnings. I mean, even if a substantial portion of the valuation is realized by agreeing to an earnout, I mean, if you know that you've built this engine that consistently sells and adapts the marketing and sales technique, then you'll be more comfortable with an earnout, and maybe you get a higher valuation, a better deal.
I think that's a great point, because when you get down to it, when you look at all the various value drivers that are out there, strategic growth is obviously, that you show that you can consistently achieve, is a huge value driver. The other thing, and probably, I don't know, there could be, I'm sure there's all sorts of arguments. One of the most valuable things you can show a potential buyer is a sticky customer with recurring revenue year over year, and your ability to then grow. I mean, that's simple fact of the matter.
I'm seeing some interesting stuff also around being able to demonstrate as part of your deal book, for instance, that your sales team has the ability to execute on the buyer's thesis. So, typically many buyers are going to want to increase margins a little bit. They're going to want to get more new logos. And if your sales team has that ability, has been demonstrating that ability, and you can document empirically that most of them can execute on that, then that takes a lot of the uncertainty away for that buyer as well.
Yep. Yep.
Well, I'm kind of getting to that time. It always goes by way too quick. Any last thoughts you want to send off to our listeners?
Yeah, I would just say, here it's the new year. Perfect time to think about things differently. Maybe you didn't do it in fact, maybe during your November and December annual planning, you just kind of looked at incremental tweaks to the way you've been doing it traditionally. But here's an opportunity. You don't want to blow up the whole plan you put together for a year, but maybe at least step back and, going back to the beginning of the conversation, stress test some of those assumptions that you've got in your plan for 2025 and begin to think about areas where you need to adapt to the way the market's changing.
Right. Yeah, great point, Ed. All this stuff is such great information. Always appreciate having you on the show. And I think basically, to Ed's point, with this new year, I would say challenge yourself to think different and, think about areas that you don't generally get into and use somebody like Ed to challenge those concepts in an area that may not be comfortable for you. A lot of times, we got engineers and others who are not necessarily salespeople that are leading these organizations, and marketing may not be something that's a great skill set. So challenge yourself to be different. Once again, Happy New Year, everybody. I wish all of you a successful and healthy 2025. Once again, Ed, thanks for being on. Kevin, as always, great conversation.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone. And if there's questions, needs, feel free to reach out.
To learn more about James Moore & Company's manufacturing services, go to jmco.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our More on Manufacturing series to receive updates when new videos and podcasts are released. If you'd like to be a guest, or if there's a topic you'd like to see covered on a future episode, contact us on our website. You can also follow us on social media for more news as the landscape on manufacturing continues to rapidly evolve.